The US President Joe Biden and the Russian President Vladimir Putin are meeting via video call as tensions increase over Russian aggression towards Ukraine. We're told the call started just under an hour ago. This is footage from the Kremlin of that meeting. Both leaders greeted each other with a wave. Joe Biden is expected to again warn of further tough sanctions against Moscow if there's a military escalation in Ukraine. The Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov has called for cool heads, insisting Moscow isn't planning an invasion while stressing it has its own red lines. Russia wants guarantees that Ukraine will not be allowed to join NATO. Ukraine estimates that Russia has assembled more than 90,000 troops near its borders and in annexed Crimea. The US and other countries fear a repeat of Russia's actions in 2014 when it seized Crimea from Ukraine. Russia has been supporting separatists in areas of eastern Ukraine, highlighted here in pink and light red. This was Vladimir Putin arriving in Crimea back then after its annexation by Moscow. In response, the West placed economic sanctions on Russia and it was booted out of the G8 group. Kurt Volker was the US Special Representative for Ukraine negotiations from 2017 to 19 and formerly US Ambassador to NATO, and I'm pleased to say joins us now. What do you make of this call taking place? Does it suggest that things are at a really critical stage, or should we be optimistic that the two leaders are speaking?
Well, I would not be optimistic. They are at a critical stage. As your report indicated, Russia has amassed a massive military capability in and around Ukraine. So they have really put in place the forces needed if they choose to invade again. I don't believe that Putin has as yet made that choice, and I don't think he has to make it today or tomorrow, but I think he is quite capable of doing that, and that's what he's trying to convey. As far as the phone call goes, I think Biden is going to try to urge Putin to stand down, to not engage in a military conflict, and to warn him that if he does, there will be very severe consequences, particularly economic and other sanctions. But there will not be a military response from the United States directly to this. However, we will also not sell out Ukraine.
Now, we've seen the images that have been released of the call. They are speaking face-to-face, the two leaders. What we understand is that out of the shot, there are advisors and people taking notes as part of the call. If you were in that room with the US president on that call advising him, what sort of things would you be suggesting to him? What would you be saying to him in terms of how to conduct it and what to push for?
Well, the first thing is to make very clear what the consequences would be if Putin does launch an invasion, that there would be severe sanctions, possibly also financial sanctions affecting Russia's ability to engage in international transactions, and these are already coordinated with the European Union. So that would be the first message. Second is to say there is no threat to Russia. NATO is not a threat to Russia. Ukraine is not a threat to Russia. There is nothing about the situation today that damages Russia's interests. There is no reason for him to be threatening Ukraine in this way. And then finally, I would say it is critical that the U.S. not be seen as selling out Ukrainian interests in any way. Ukraine is a sovereign, independent country. It has a right to its territory. It has a right to be a free democracy and independent society, and to seek affiliations with NATO or the EU if it chooses to, and if it qualifies. So we're not in a position to give away Ukraine's interests, and that's very important that that be conveyed as well.
With that in mind then, Mr. Volker, if Russia says one of its red lines is a guarantee that Ukraine will never be allowed to join NATO, is that something you think President Biden can agree to?
Absolutely not. I think it would be depriving Ukraine of its rights as a sovereign state to aspire to that. We can't predict what the future will be. I think President Biden could say that in our judgment and in the judgment of most allies, Ukraine is not ready to join NATO. From everything from the functioning of its democratic institutions and rule of law to reform of the military and civilian control and interoperability with NATO, it's a long way from being able to join. But we shouldn't take it off the table as a long-term possibility.
But you can see how to the Kremlin that would be an uncomfortable situation to have a member of NATO right on its border like that, and with their own domestic audience in mind, President Putin may feel that that simply wouldn't be palatable to Russians.
You have Norway and Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania and Turkey all bordering Russia, and none of them present any threat to Russia. And there's no reason why Ukraine would present any threat either. In fact, it's Russia that's attacking Ukraine, not the other way around.
Okay, and just more broadly, give us a sense of how these kinds of calls work. What is going on? I mean, are there any moments where they might break off and talk about other matters? Are there any sort of personal moments? Give us a sense of what might be happening.
Well, first off, these things are prepared in advance by staff. So they will have communicated directly between the Kremlin and the White House to say what time will the call be, who will be present in the room, what is the agenda going to be. And from what we know already, we know that they agreed that the agenda would not be Ukraine only, that they said they would also talk about the diplomatic disputes between the U.S. and Russia over expelling diplomats. They might talk about Iran. They might refer to the strategic stability talks. And I think this is to give a sense of stability to the U.S.-Russia relationship that is not only about Ukraine. But that being said, I would guarantee that Ukraine is going to dominate the conversation today. Then in terms of who's there, you're likely to have senior representatives on the U.S. side from the Pentagon, from the State Department. The National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, will certainly be there. Vice President's office will probably have someone. And on the Kremlin, they'll have additional senior advisors on Putin's side as well.
Okay. I dare say some technical staff to make sure they don't have to use the phrase, Mr. President, you are on mute. Kurt Volker, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.